A lot has been said about the Black Panthers being homophobic, but that's not really the case. You have to remember that there were multiple chapters of the Panthers and they didn't always get along or agree, especially when the FBI started passing letters to increase animosity. For instance, you have Eldridge Cleaver demeaning survivor programs like Free Breakfast as sissy programs, with sissy being a slur for gay and bisexual men at the time. Meanwhile, the New York Panthers had openly bisexual member Kawasi Balagoon, formerly known as Donald Weems, and Pat Carter was in California but openly lesbian. Erica Huggins was with the Panthers for 14 years and stated the following: "Party members were free to have lovers, male, female, multiple lovers, anytime they want, sometimes with the permission of people who were married to others, and with permission, I would say that because we lived on the edge and didn't have a great respect for gendered society we live in or the construct called family that created it as we went along to serve us and hopefully not in disservice to anybody else." That sounds like a culture of bisexual polygamy to me, and honestly, if you look at the personal lives of some of the Panthers of all genders, a case can be made. I'm just saying. At one point, the FBI was afraid Huey P. Newton might form an alliance with the Gay Liberation Army after giving speeches and distributing writings calling for unity between both movements, but it didn't start that way. In 1969, a French writer named Jean Genet visited the Black Panthers in the United States. Genet is openly gay, and during his time, he witnessed multiple things that could be considered homophobic. Repeated usage of the words sissy, punk, and of course faggot. He kept his feelings under wraps, but when he returned to France, he felt compelled to send a letter to Huey P. Newton. The letter opened Huey's eyes to the fact that gay people were indeed oppressed too. This eventually led to Huey giving a speech in 1970 calling for solidarity and urging support not only for the women's rights movements, but gay rights movements as well. In the opening of his speech, he stated, "During these past few years, strong movements have developed among women and among homosexuals seeking their liberation. There's been some uncertainty about how to relate to these movements. Whatever your personal opinions and your insecurities about homosexuality and the various liberation movements among homosexuals and women, and I speak of the homosexuals and women as oppressed, we should try to unite with them in a revolutionary fashion. I say whatever your insecurities are, because as we very well know, sometimes our first instinct is to want to hit a homosexual in the mouth and want a woman to be quiet. We want to hit a homosexual in the mouth because we are afraid that we might be homosexual, and we want to hit the woman or shut her up because we are afraid that she might castrate us or take the nuts that we might not have to start with." During the speech, he does admit he doesn't understand why people are gay, but he understands that his past homophobia was conditioned by society and they must work to overcome that, finishing his speech with, "Homosexuals are not enemies of the people. We should try to form a working coalition with the gay liberation and women's liberation groups. We must always handle social forces in the most appropriate manner." With this speech, Huey made the Black Panthers the first black civil rights group to take a positive stance on LGBTQ rights. David Hilliard, Panthers Chief of Staff, will go on to back this up, stating, "The Panthers were a human rights organization seeking to move mankind to a higher manifestation for all people." Again, everyone didn't like this, but for most Panthers, Huey's words were enough to get the point across. So much so that the FBI thought the Black Panthers and Gay Liberation Front were planning a merger. A memo issued on November 13, 1970 stated that members of the Gay Liberation Front were traveling to DC to meet with the Panthers for a possible merger. In reality, they were just going to the Panthers Revolutionary People's Constitutional Convention. So were the Black Panthers homophobic? Some of them. But the official stance of almost every branch was to support LGBTQ rights. And there were multiple members who were openly LGBTQ, even if labels weren't really being used back then and don't really matter now. The answer isn't always a yes or no. Sometimes it's complicated.